Ara Fell was a game that, for me at least, fell through the cracks a little bit. It was released initially in 2016, but it wasn't something that I had played until a few days ago, and I was pretty excited with what I found. So stick around, because I am SuperDerek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and this is Experience Points, a less formal, more laid-back sort of video where I talk about RPGs that I've played a little bit of but haven't yet finished. Ara Fell was originally a game that was made using RPG Maker but has been since revamped, and honestly, for a game that started out with RPG Maker, it actually looks a lot better than you might at first expect. RPG Maker games sort of have this reputation of being kind of bare bones in a lot of ways, but honestly, visually speaking and mechanically, this has been pretty great so far. Actually, as I continue to play through it, each scene that I walk through and explore is more detailed than I would have expected, even from some late-stage Super Nintendo RPGs. It's something that I've actually been really excited to continue exploring through. That's kind of the visual side of things out of the way, but how does that actually play? Ara Fell plays a lot like older Final Fantasy titles, where you have your main characters on one side of the screen, the enemies show up on the other side of the screen. There's no random encounters. All the enemies that you fight do show up on the overworld map, so that's kind of nice. After every single battle, you heal up entirely with your hit points and mana points, so it's basically gives you an excuse to go all out every single time that you get into an encounter. So it's really nice to be able to just kind of go crazy and see what happens. And because of that, the game really encourages you to explore what the various mechanics are, to see how to use certain skills to your abilities, to the best of your abilities, and they just kind of generally regenerate throughout the entire battle pretty slowly at kind of a set rate per turn per character. The game does also present a pretty good amount of challenge as far as that's concerned. I've died several times while playing through Ara Fell so far. I'm about 10-15 hours in at this point. I think I've died probably 6 or 7 times, trying to bite off more than I can chew, because at one point the game actually really kind of opens up and lets you go exploring in any which direction, and you can do all sorts of side quests and bounties, and I was trying to do some bounties that were well out of my league, and well, unfortunately, I think I'm gonna have to put those on hold for now, but the bounties that I was able to finish off were actually super satisfying when I was able to really get in there and finally figure out a strategy that'd take care of them, you know? I was really excited to finally finish the bunny girl one, and I didn't realize if I had just held off and done the story side thing, I would have had an extra party member that would have made that a little bit easier, but that's just sort of the nature of it. It will let you do what you want to do if you can figure out a way to do it, and I really do appreciate that about Ara Fell. It's kind of a 16-bit style RPG, but the training wheels are off. It's made for people who, like me, have played several in the past and kind of have an idea of what they want to do and how to go about doing it. Every time you level up, for instance, it will allow you to distribute 10 stats, or 10 points to any given of four different stats, whether that's attack, defense, agility, or wisdom, and the game does not tell you where to put it. It's kind of there for you to explore and play around with, and I also really appreciate that. It's gonna let you make mistakes. If you just dump everything into agility, you will find out pretty quickly that you cannot just dodge every single attack. I mean, everything is built within reason, so you should be able to do a lot of the stuff that you want to do, but it's not easily broken, though. Try as I might. The game opens up with a boy and a girl, and they're going off exploring these old elven ruins, and the girl falls through into a pit and has to go exploring to get out, and she finds this magic ring. There's this whole rabbit hole that just kind of extends from then on about this ring and what it does, and things get pretty crazy because she uncovers a plot in her village that's related to some vampires and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. This game's main antagonist happened to be a bunch of vampires, and I kind of like that as a backdrop. We're all on a floating island in the sky, and there's vampires in the area, and there's a kingdom, and the king might be sick. It's really interesting, everything that's kind of going on right now, and I'm kind of curious about where it could possibly lead. I've been playing it on Nintendo Switch up to this point, and I've really been enjoying it. It plays at a pretty smooth rate. I mean, it's a 2D game. I wouldn't really expect it to have much trouble, but it does have a lot of visual effects kind of going on, you know, in certain areas. There's lots of particle effects in certain areas, so I really like the way that it looks. The exploration's really fun. There's a lot of little puzzles and lots of little things to go and find, and treasures to locate, and crystals to mine, and items to craft. That's a whole other thing. This game's very heavy on the crafting system at this point. where basically all of the weapons and armors that you wear are something that you craft and upgrade further through crafting. And that's sort of how everything is laid out, is that money that you can use to buy crafting items, but the majority of that all just kind of ties further into the crafting system. Everything is going to be made by the protagonists, which is pretty interesting, I think. The controls of Ara Fell are pretty straightforward. The most of the battle system, in fact, is pretty straightforward as well. If you've played a Super Nintendo RPG, then this is going to feel pretty similar. Now, if I had to criticize the game for one thing, it would be that it does feel a little bit overly grindy in certain points. It definitely feels like a game is intending to be difficult, and that a lot of the challenges that you would want to overcome, that I want to overcome, could probably be done by grinding and maybe over-grinding and over-leveling. The fact of the matter is that the enemies that I'm fighting to try to get these things, to get the experience points, to get the item drops, the drops that I seem to want seem to be pretty unlikely to show up, and so you end up fighting a lot of these enemies, and even though they're maybe not extremely difficult, you might finish a battle in 1 to 2 rounds or so. It doesn't give you the experience points to make it feel like you're making a lot of progress at any given point. So if I had to nitpick here, I would say that it does feel a little bit grindy. And I know that a lot of people don't mind that at all, and if you don't mind it, then this is going to be great for you. I enjoyed it quite a bit, but if you do mind the grind, then this is something that you'll probably want to be mindful of. One of the other mechanics that I just recently discovered in the game is the ability to use fairy circles to teleport from certain areas, to help you solve puzzles and go exploring in different areas. Exploration, I feel like, is a really big theme of this game. Not only in the fact that the whole thing opens up with you exploring some ancient elven ruins, the whole world, there's no overworld map. It wants you to explore the spaces in between the various towns. There's a lot of stuff to find, lots of materials to collect, like I mentioned before. There are lots of side quests that you can do, even a side quest tracker to help you keep track of what you're supposed to be doing. I really appreciate that this game really seems to shove as much to do into it as you could possibly want. And the quests even give you experience points, which is really handy, especially in the early part of the game where you're not really wanting to do a whole lot of grinding, but you do want to gain some levels. Well, that's the way to do it, is to do a whole bunch of side quests and just kind of get some easy levels that way at the beginning of the game. The music in the game is actually really, really nice. That's one of the very first things that I noticed as I was exploring, is like, oh, this actually has some really good music going on. It doesn't quite steal the show. There are a few moments where you can actually hear it loop, and that you hear it happen, but the music is so good that it doesn't really matter when it happens, personally speaking. I've just really been enjoying the music. I feel like the character art is also really great. The portrait art does feel a little bit budget art, I think, compared to the rest of the game, if I had to be picky, but I will also say that there's a lot of it. It seems like pretty much everybody in the game has their own sort of personalized character art to a degree. There is no voice acting or anything of the nature unless you do it all in your head. The game is, visually speaking, just very good. It's very well put together. All in all, for an indie RPG, I don't really think you could really go wrong with Ara Fell on your Nintendo Switch. Definitely be sure to check it out on the Nintendo Switch, or it's also available on Steam. The Switch version, again, is the version that I've been playing, and it plays pretty much perfectly. But again, if you're new here, please be sure to get subscribed, because I am SuperDerek. I make thoughtful and thought-provoking videos for gamers who love RPGs, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, everybody.